Today on Locked On Bearcats, it's another episode of Bold Prediction Tuesday, and today we're looking at the wide receivers, a position with a lot of potential for this upcoming season. That's on today's episode of Locked On Bearcats.
Our Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Indeed, you are Locked On Bearcats on a Tuesday, May 31st, 2022. Alex Frank here with you, bringing all of my experiences from my days as sports director at Bearcast Media, where I was a play-by-play announcer and weekly sports radio show host, and bringing all of those experiences here to the Locked On Bearcats podcast each and every day. If you are watching on the Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We are at 124 subscribers and counting. But we're not done yet, so hit that subscribe button. Follow us so you can get an alert when a new podcast episode drops. You can also like and share a comment on today's video. You can do the same on audio. If you're downloading from an audio platform, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast, don't forget you can hit that subscribe button there too. You can also share a comment and or give it a rating. All of that helps more Bearcats fans like you find this podcast. It's another episode of Bold Prediction Tuesday. Thank you. And today, we're looking at the wide receivers. This is a position where I like the potential. I really do. I think there are players who have been working towards breakout years, and this is the year for some to do that. On an episode last week, you heard me talk about how I think Tyler Scott can be this year's breakout player. But there are other players in this position where I think they can break out too. So let's get into some bold predictions. We start with number one. Tyler Scott will finish in the top 10 in receptions in the American Athletic Conference. And this is not going to be that hard to do. When you look at the top 10 leaders in receptions last year in the conference, number one, Nathaniel Dell, who apparently has a nickname of Tank. Not really sure why. Anyway, Ryan O'Keefe, number two, Josh Johnson, number three, Calvin Austin, the third, fourth, Tyler Snead, five, Rashay Rice, six, Alec Pierce, seven, Juan Carlos Santana, eight, Danny Gray, nine, Xavier Weaver, 10. It's not going to be difficult for Tyler Scott, who finished 22nd at 30. Now then again, number 10, on the list only had 48 receptions. It was Xavier Weaver and Sean Dykes who tied for 10th. You're telling me that Tyler Scott can have 18 more receptions this year? When Alec Pierce is not here, he's going to be this team's number one wide receiver. And there are a lot of players in the top 10 who are not going to be here this year. They're not going to be with their teams, including guys like Josh Johnson, guys like Tyler Snead, guys like, I believe Calvin Austin III is not with Memphis. I actually shouldn't say that. I'm not really sure. But I'm saying that there are players in front of Tyler Scott in the top 10 who are not going to be with their teams this year. And given that the difference last year between 1 and 7 in receptions. Number one Nathaniel Dell had 90 receptions last year. Alec Pierce was in 7th at 52. That's 38 fewer receptions, and you're still in the top 10. So if Tyler Scott can get to 50, or maybe even just 45, which I think he can, and you think about the players in front of him who are not going to be there, Josh Johnson, one of them, Tyler Snead, who was a prolific receiver for years with the Pirates, he's not going to be there. And on his own team, Alec Pierce is not going to be there. So there is the absolute potential for Tyler Scott to finish in the top 10 in receptions. 18 more receptions than he had last year. That's doable. That's very doable. Because you have to remember he played behind Alec Pierce. And he's going to have the benefit of having Evan Prater as his starting quarterback this year. This is your, by the way, this is your segment reminder that Evan Prater should be the starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bearcats in 2022. Excuse me. With that, bold prediction number 2. Nick Mardner will finish in the top 3 in yards in the conference. Let's go back to last year's statistical leaders. In the conference for yards, Nick Mardner, by the way, 913 last year, would have been 4th in the conference. Nathaniel Dell and Calvin Austin were shockingly 1 and 2. Josh Johnson was shockingly number 3. And then went Alec Pierce 4, Tyler Snead 5, Xavier Weaver 6, Ryan O'Keefe 7, Danny Gray 8, Juan Carlos Santana 9, Rashae Rice 10. Some players are still here, some players are not. But Nick Mardner had 913 yards last year in the Mountain West. And he's now coming to a program that is going to throw the ball. He is now coming to a program whose offensive coordinator is Gino Guidugli, who I have high expectations for. This offense is not going anywhere from where it was last year. Nick Mardner had over 900 yards last year. Now he comes to play with Evan Prater. Now, I don't remember who his quarterback was at Hawaii last year, but I do know this. If you're going to come play with Evan Prater, the potential is there. And you have to remember that, okay, Nathaniel Dell's in a class by himself. He's probably going to have over 1,300 yards again this year. Calvin Austin is gone. Josh Johnson is gone. Alec Pierce is gone. Tyler Snead is gone. It's not going to – so these are bold predictions, but at the same time, it's not going to be that difficult, I think, for these predictions to come into fruition. Nick Mardner finishing in the top 3 in receptions. When you think about he can run deep, he can run across the middle. His route tree is very extensive, and that's only going to help this offense. The number of wide receivers on this Bearcats team, there are a lot of wide receivers on this team. I believe there are 13 wide receivers coming into this season. Now there's a lot of targets to go around, and in previous years, that target distribution was spread heavily. Remember guys like Trent Cloud, Malik Moj, Ja'Shawn Jackson, Rashad Medeiros, Thomas Geddes. Remember all those players? Targets were evenly distributed. But I think this year you're going to see 2 prolific receivers. And it's prolific receivers. Cincinnati's never really had those. I'm talking about Nick Mardner, and I'm talking about Tyler Scott. Normally, the leading receivers have come from the tight ends, and that's fine. I think that changes this year. So up next, who are we not talking about at this position? What kind of impact are players that, aren't Tyler Scott or Nick Mardner? What kind of impact will they have on this year's team? I'll explain next, but first I got to tell you about BetOnline because they are our partners that continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to the playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. It's the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Alex Frank here with you on this Tuesday, May 31st, 2022, the last day of May. That's hard to believe. I mean, it feels like, it was the first day of the year, and we were recapping the Cotton Bowl, and I mean, wow, it has just absolutely gone by fast. And this podcast has come a long way, and major thank you to you for making it your first listen or watch every day. Definitely intending on or hoping that the number of subscribers continues to go up. So hit that subscribe button, because that way you can get alerts if you follow us as well when a new episode drops. All right, so let's get into the players that we're not talking about, because this position group is headlined by Scott. It's headlined by Nick Mardner. Yeah, you have Trey Tucker. He's had his moments throughout his Bearcats career, but I'm looking up and down this roster, and I'm seeing guys like Will Pauling and guys like, Ashton Kohler. I'm seeing, players like, LaChristian Blue Smith, who, was a highly touted recruit coming out of high school, hasn't really seen much of the field yet. Wyatt Fisher. I'm seeing a lot of players who have been on this roster for many years. They just haven't really seen the field a whole lot. But there's one player who missed last year, but I think he will have a breakout year this year. So with that, bold prediction number 3, Jaden Thompson will finish in the top 3 in receptions on this year's team. This is not a far-fetched prediction at all. In fact, when you think about it, Jaden Thompson is a former 4-star recruit. This is a testament to the depth that Luke Fickell has created here with recruiting. There are 4-star players who haven't even seen the field. And now they will, because Jaden Thompson is going to get playing time this year. He had 6 receptions for 58 yards in 2020, and then he missed last season. But I think this year, healthy, I think he's going to come back strong. And here's a guy who needs a breakout season. Because eventually, he has to break out to prove that this was a good get for Cincinnati on the recruiting trail. And B, if things don't work out for him this year, you can lose a 4-star recruit to the transfer portal. And that can impact you going to the Big 12. The more receivers you can have on your roster carrying into the Big 12, and for Evan Prater, this is your segment reminder that Evan Prater should be the starting quarterback for the 2022 Bearcats football season. The more weapons you can have for him, the better it is for Evan Prater and his development and his success. Because the Big 12 is an air raid offense. Houston and UCF, the way they play offense, they are fit for the Big 12 because they go air raid offense. Cincinnati can. They just choose to be a little more physical, and that's fine. I think that can win in the Big 12. Baylor won the Big 12 last year somewhat playing that way, particularly on defense. So I'm thinking about, yes, Tyler Scott and Nick Mardner and Trey Tucker are going to be your headliners, but Jaden Thompson's been this receiver that's just been kind of lurking, didn't really see a lot of action in 2020, and then missed all of last year. This could be his breakout year. And after Mardner and Scott, the number 3 receptions leader on this team, I feel like the race is wide open for that. I really do. And it's not just about this year for Jaden Thompson. It's about building for the future. Up next, the final 2 predictions, bold predictions for the wide receiver group. But first, let's hear a word from 2 of our sponsors. Locked On Bearcats here with you each and every day. Your first listen or watch of every day. Alex Frank here with you, your host each and every day. The NBA Finals starting Thursday night. The Celtics and the Warriors from San Francisco. Game 1, 9 o'clock on ABC. And, of course, on ESPN Radio. Looking forward to this series. I think it's going to be a tremendous series. Game 1 tonight of the Western Conference Finals of the Stanley Cup playoffs between the Oilers and the Avalanche. Really looking forward to that series. Colorado has been a machine this postseason. Edmonton, after being taken to Game 7 with the Kings in the first round, really kind of, really just taking Calgary to the woodshed. That game is tomorrow night on TNT. And I forgot for a minute who has home ice advantage in that round. The Avalanche do, so that'll be at 8 o'clock on TNT. At the time of this recording, I did not know who won. At the time of this recording, this was recorded before Game 7 between the New York Rangers and Carolina Hurricanes. So I don't know who's facing the Tampa Bay Lightning tomorrow night, Wednesday night, in the Eastern Conference Finals. That series will begin in either New York or Carolina, depending on who won Game 7 last night. But you know who won Game 7, but at the time of this recording, the game had not started, so I did not know and do not know. Anyway, but I will know eventually. All right, let's get back to the task at hand. That is the bold predictions for the wide receivers. Bold prediction number 4. 2 receivers will have at least 5 touchdowns for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Now, this is with 2 tight ends who I think will each have 5 touchdowns. But again, there are so many options at this wide receiver position. When you have 13 wide receivers, they're all going to get their playing time, right? And you'll hear about why I think that in my final bold prediction. But I just think there are so many receivers that are going to be on the field and are going to get playing time that, yeah, they're going to get 5 touchdowns. I think Tyler Scott is a lock for 5 touchdowns. I think Nick Mardner can get there. I think Trey Tucker maybe. I think that Jaden Thompson perhaps can get there. This is a rather bold prediction because, like I just said, outside of Tyler Scott, you really don't know who's going to get to 5 touchdowns. Mardner can, but are you really sure he's going to? So this is more of a bold prediction, especially when you have the best tight end tandem in the country, arguably. But I think with so many receivers and with Evan Prater, coming along, this is your segment reminder that Evan Prater should be the starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bearcats. I think with so many options at receiver, and if Evan Prater comes along, and the fact that the schedule is not overly difficult, home schedule is a breeze. Away schedule has some bumps along the way, but at the same time, I still think it's a very winnable schedule for Cincinnati to win at least 4 games on the road. If Evan Prater, as he comes along, receivers are going to benefit too. Let's get to my final bold prediction. Bold prediction number 5. Multiple underclassmen will play in at least 4 games. So remember in the first episode of this series, Bold Prediction Tuesday, when we were talking about the corners, right? And I said that a lot of corners, in fact, I can look back in my bold predictions if I still have them here. Which I do not. Okay. I think I said every corner will play in at least 4 games this year. That's because I think the Bearcats will be in a lot of blowout games this year, which means younger players are going to be given the opportunity to play. So we can look at the wide receivers that are on this roster. How many receivers that there are? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12 wide receivers. I thought there was 13. Well, 13 is my lucky number. But 12 is a good number too, especially in Cincinnati. I was also born on the 12th day of the 11th month of the year. Anyway, so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sophomores. Chris Scott, Ashton Culler, Norman Love, Drew Donnelly, Will Poling. You got some juniors in Jaden Thompson, Tyler Scott, and Jair Thomas. So there are a lot of players that we're going to see playing time because I do believe that the Bearcats will be in a lot of blowout games. Kennesaw State, which I will be at that game. Looking forward to it. Miami could be a blowout. Indiana might be a blowout for all we know. Then you think about, Tulsa, Temple, USF, Navy, Tulane. There's a lot of games that could get 45-0 in the third quarter. You're going to put your backups in. This, and I think you will see that more this year because there's not so much pressure to run up the score. Because the Bearcats have already accomplished getting to the college football playoff. And that's why I think you'll see a lot of players from the receiver position play in at least 4 games this year. But get your younger guys in there, get them ready for the Big 12. Because Tyler Scott eventually could head to the NFL. Nick Mardner too. Trey Tucker. I mean, they're all going to eventually either head to the NFL or graduate. You need some development from the younger players. And I think you'll get that this year. All right, that's going to do it for me today here on Locked On Bearcats. Don't forget, on Thursday, John Garcia Jr. will be back with me, the director of football recruiting for Sports Illustrated. We're going to talk about which freshmen on this year's roster can make the biggest impact, plus what positions are the most of need heading into the Big 12 for the Cincinnati Bearcats. We'll talk about that. So much to get to with him. I've been trying to get Joe Marino of Locked On Bills on an episode. I might try to get him on tomorrow, What If Wednesday, because the overtime rules, differences and similarities between college football and the NFL, mainly the differences, have always fascinated me. And I think who better to have on than a man from the city who I believe was most affected by the NFL overtime rules, and that's Joe Marino from Locked On Buffalo Bills. So trying to get him on. Don't forget, if you're watching on the Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel, to hit that subscribe button. At 124 and counting, but we're not done yet. Far from it. So hit that subscribe button. Follow us so you can get an alert every time a podcast drops. And you can also like and share a comment on today's video. If you're downloading from an audio platform, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button there too. All of that helps more Bearcats fans like you find this podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Now go make your second listen. The Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Rafael Barlow, Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin give fans an in-depth look into the biggest prospects, the latest player rankings, and of course, big boards. Follow Locked On NBA Big Board every day on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at Frankie_Natty. Follow Locked On Bearcats on Twitter at Locked On Cats. And don't forget, you can follow me on Instagram, AlexFrank9_, and email me if you have any questions at alex3frank@gmail.com. For the Locked On Bearcats podcast, I'm Alex Frank. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you tomorrow on the first day of June. How's that? The first day of June. My goodness, where has time gone? I don't know. Anyway, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the final day of May, and I will talk to you all tomorrow in the month of June.